Debunked edition. Debunked, uncovering hard truths about EDSA, martial law, Marcos Aquino, with a special section on the Duterte presidency. Selected essays by Rigoberto D. Tiglao. Hidden facts about EDSA. Perhaps it was because of something like the so-called fog of war, or an instance of the adage that history is written by the victors. But there were facts, now indisputable, that we didn't know, or were hidden from public knowledge during the February 1986 People Power Revolt, and even 3 decades later. Perhaps because of the disillusionment with the presidency of the son of the so-called heroine of EDSA 1, the facts have been ferreted out, or have simply become clearer. Fact 1. Cory Aquino had little to do with EDSA 1. Ironically, it was Marcos' legal and military pillar, his longtime defense minister, Juan Ponce Enrile, who, in a last stand to defend himself and his Ram boys from certain doom, was mainly responsible for EDSA 1. The events that led to it were triggered by the botched coup attempt by the Reform the Armed Forces movement, RAM, cabal of colonels under Enrile's aegis. It was to have been a classic coup by colonels, as what happened in many Latin American countries and other third world nations. The colonels included Gregorio Honasan, Tirso Gador, Rex Robles, Tito Legazpi, Red Capunan, and Felix Turingan. As revealed more recently in Juan Ponce Enrile's biography published last year and articles written by the colonel since 1986, the conspirators, after months of planning, decided to attack boldly or foolishly Malacañang Palace at 2 a.m. of February 23, 1986, and capture Marcos and his family for its coup d'etat to take over government. Talking incessantly to foreign and local media for months about their opposition to Marcos, it is astonishing that the Ram was so confident or naive that its plot wouldn't be uncovered, and really only realized their plot had been uncovered when a historical trade minister, Roberto Ongpin, on the morning of February 22 called him to complain that his military security detail had been arrested by the Marines that night. Ongpin wasn't aware that his security detail were RAM members. They were rather ineptly reconnoitering the residence of a Marine commander, General Artemio Tadyar, to prepare for their planned attack on him the next day, when they were spotted by military police and arrested. After lunch that day, and really realizing that his and his RAM boys' plot had been uncovered, or had been perhaps long known by Marcos, decided that rather than being ignominiously arrested and even probably executed, decided to take a last stand. His headquarters in Camp Aguinaldo. Several of the Ram boys had been in close contact for months with foreign correspondents, a favorite source of assets for the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency. A 2015 newspaper article by 3 Ram colonels revealed that an emissary from the Pentagon promised the Ram American government protection from arrest if it refrained from employing violent methods in pursuing its reformist goals. Did Enrile and his Ram boys simply expect that the Pentagon would keep its words and intervene in some way to save them from Marcos' wrath? Enrile, though, was clever enough to immediately call foreign correspondents to Camp Crame to cover what he thought was his last stand after then Vice Chief of Staff and longtime PC commander Fidel Ramos agreed to join him in his mutiny. Another brilliant move of Enrile was to call Cardinal Sin to ask his faithful to surround Camp Crame to form their human shield. People power or people fodder? Fact 2. Only a small fraction of the military supported the mutineers. Enrile's Ram boys consisted mostly of the colonels he had taken under his wing as defense minister. Air Force Commander Vicente Picho, Army Commander Josephus Ramos, and Marine Commandant Tadyar were all loyal to the chain of command. The Philippine Constabulary, surprisingly though, as it was headed for more than a decade by Ramos, who was succeeded by his protege, Renato de Villa, was divided in its loyalties. The Marcos military succumbed to the EDSA forces because they realized that they were helpless facing the huge crowds. Marcos had given them the categorical order, which was impossible to implement: disperse the crowds, but do not shoot them. Isn't it Marcos, therefore, that made it possible for EDSA to be a peaceful revolution? Contrast that to the political will and ruthlessness of the Chinese Communist Party, which ordered the dispersal of thousands of protesters trying to mimic EDSA 1 in 1989 in Tiananmen Tiananmen Square, China's government deployed battalions of soldiers and police and even columns of tanks in order to crush the rebellion. Fact 3. Marcos had negotiated with the U.S. to evacuate him and his family by helicopter from Malacañang to Lawag City, the capital of his home province of Ilocos Norte. We'll never know what Marcos, who even his arch-enemies concede was a brilliant strategist, intended to do in the north, to rally his army to defend him and retake Malacañang, or to negotiate a peaceful retirement. The yellow propaganda, of course, made a joke out of it, that Marcos thought he was going to Poway but was instead brought to Hawaii. That joke made most Filipinos conclude that Marcos fled to the U.S. in fear of his and his family's life. Poway, however, is a fourth-class municipality that didn't have any emotional links to Marcos, who was born in Sarat. The truth is that testimonies in hearings in the U.S. Congress, which investigated funds were used for the Marcos operation, incontrovertibly show that the U.S. military had orders to take Marcos and his party to Lawag. The helicopters, however, decided to land at Clark Air Base as it had become dangerous to fly to Lawag City, since they had arrived right after dawn and the airport there didn't have runway lights. However, the U.S. military received a request from Cory Aquino for Marcos to be evacuated to Hawaii, which it immediately did after clearance from the White House itself.